Welcome, everybody, to our first ever online Parent Academy EOGs and understanding them and preparing for them, town hall style. So we have several different folks with us today who will be a part of this discussion. I'm Ted Duncan. I'm the school director of Brevard Academy, and we are beginning our EOGs at the end of this week. So we wanted to give parents the opportunity to prepare and understand what is happening with EOGs and what that all means. And I am joined today by Megan Monk and Stacy Seafeld, our two outstanding counselors, and our Dean of Academics, Amber Wolf. And we are just going to talk to you a little bit about preparing for the EOGs, what they mean, and how you can prepare, and what we have done, and what happens with all that information. We will have some time for questions at the end. So, first off, what are these assessments and what is an assessment? So these are some definitions of what it means when we talk about an assessment. The end of grade tests, or the EOGs, are an assessment of how students have mastered the content or the learning objectives over time, over the school year. And we are constantly assessing students as we are thinking about, did they learn what was presented during my class period? Did they learn? Are they retaining that information over a period of time? And the EOGs, end of grade tests, are very much just like an assessment that you might see throughout the school year, except that it is really an examination or a test of information that's been presented throughout the entire year. So our 5th and 8th graders will be taking the EOG for science on Friday. And what that assessment will do is it will look at how they have performed and how they have mastered the content in their science standards over the course of the entire year. And so why do we assess? What is the point of these assessments? Assessments give stakeholders a better picture of how students are performing. As a parent at Brevard Academy, you are given information about how your child is performing on our benchmark assessments. We use the iReady program to assess throughout the year for using benchmark testing in both math and reading. And what this does is this allows students, as you can see in this slide, it allows students to know how they're performing and where they might need to spend a little bit of extra time. With our benchmark assessments are formative assessments, meaning that they're not given at the end of the year, and there's still time to make adjustments within our curriculum. Those assessments as well, they give families information about data that families can use to see, okay, how might I best support my child? What is some work that's still being done in the classroom? And sometimes those assessments can also show where a student has mastered and where they still need some help. And it can also show what has been covered and what has not been covered. Teachers really use those formative assessments to see how they best need to prepare for the rest of the school year. And is there a topic that students already feel very comfortable with? So that might be something that we don't have to spend as much time on. Or is there a concept that is just very difficult for the students? And that's a concept that the teacher might need to spend more time within that subject. Now that might be done for a whole class, but as you can also see, assessing students throughout the year can also lead us to understand how individual students are doing. And so it can give opportunities for remediation or accelerating students there. And then schools, districts, as you know, as a charter, we are a district of 1, but this really helps us to set some clear understanding of how we performed and what we need to do differently, and how we can work to improve. 2 years ago as a school, our school improvement team came up with some very specific actions about how we can work to become a B school and reach that level of proficiency where our students are scoring at 70% or above on end of grade tests and assessments that are given out. And I feel like we really did a good job with those, and we still are using some of those same tools and those same strategies that the school improvement team created 2 years ago to help us continue to show academic performance. As you know, last year we earned a B, and we exceeded expectations for growth within our school, and those are things that we're very proud of. Parents can also use EOG assessment data to look and compare schools and see, hey, how is this school comparing to this school in terms of proficiency on EOGs? That's one measure that parents might want to take a look at when they're thinking about which school to send their child to. So, what does that end of year standardized assessment schedule look like, and what will your child take? So, on this slide, you can see all the different end of year summary assessments that children take at Brevard Academy. You can see that in kindergarten through second grade, they take the iReady diagnostic and then the DIBELS assessment, and both of those help to guide us, as we discussed earlier. They help to guide teachers with where, and what they should spend some more time on. The DIBELS is a literacy assessment. In third grade, that's when we start to see students taking the NC EOG in reading and math. That continues on throughout eighth grade. And then in fifth and eighth grade, you'll also see that students take that science end of grade test. And those will all those end of grade tests take place within the last 10 days. One thing that we didn't cover, and I just want to make sure that we're clear on here, is a standardized assessment. A standardized assessment means that every child is getting the same assessment. And so when we start to talk about NC EOGs, those are standardized across the entire state. So all fifth graders, all eighth graders will take the same EOG, whether they're here in the mountains or out on the coast. And that just really gives a level playing field to look and say, okay, here was the curriculum, here were the standards that needed to be covered, and this is how school A scored as compared to school B. So it allows us to take a look at that information. So what do we do with the information from standardized assessments? So these are just 4 different ways that we use this information. It helps us to identify those skill gaps. It helps us to identify groups of students or grade levels that might need a little bit more work. It also helps us to identify where we might need to make adjustments in our own teaching, and in terms of whether it be a concept or whether it be a type of skill or a type of subject that needs to be covered. A few years ago, we definitely identified that nonfiction and reading for information was a place where we could use some improvement. And so that's something that we have worked to embed in both our science and our social studies classes. But this is just a way that standardized assessments can help us to identify what it is that we need to spend more time on. And then finally, what are the ways that North Carolina ensures that the assessments at the end of the year are fair and accessible for all students? So as you can see, each one of the questions goes through this rigorous process. And do the questions match the content standards for the grade level? Are the questions free of bias? And are the questions age appropriate? So with that, when we talk about the standards, we pay a lot of attention to the North Carolina state standards. We use the core knowledge curriculum, but we use that to address the North Carolina state standards. And the standards are just what North Carolina has decided that students need to know. And we take a look at those because we want to best prepare our students to be able to answer questions that the state of North Carolina deemed important at the end of the year. I like to equate this to the idea of we don't want to practice playing flag football, and then when it comes to the big game, say, okay, here, put on these pads, and now you guys are going to tackle each other. That just creates added stress. We want to make sure that we are preparing students with the information that they need to know along the way, as these are end of grade tests, and so they are a summative of everything that is learned. The test can be stressful, which I know that Ms. Monk and Ms. Seefeld will talk about a little bit, and how students can best address those. And We don't have as many opportunities to make accommodations to standardized tests, as it is a standardized program, as we could with our own in-class assessments. So it's important to understand why we're not able to do those. And that reason is right here. We want to make sure that it's all given in the same way. And the state comes up with very comprehensive rules about how all of these need to be taken care of. But we take care of, we understand that stress is a very real part of testing. And so we take some extra steps on test day to make sure that students are prepared. But that also starts very early on in the year. And one of the biggest ways is, are we actually taking care to make sure that we address what students are going to see at the end of the year? And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Miss Monk.
Yeah, so in the state of North Carolina, standardized assessments currently play a major role in the United States in public education. And as a parent, there is a lot of ways that you can support your child before and after taking any standardized test, whether it's iReady, the NC check-ins, or the EOG, and at the beginning of third grade, EOG. And we'll move into those next. I think Stacy's taking it from here.
All right. So before the test, there are some released practice items that are available that students can practice at home. And it also gives parents some great insight into what the questions look like, what kind of content will they be covering, and just kind of the setup of the test in general. And so the EOG release practice items are available for anyone to be able to access those. As a parent myself, I have my child do a couple kind of every night just to practice and get feel confident. I think a lot of reducing student stress is helping them to feel confident around the test. And so the more that they've been exposed to the types of questions that might be asked on the test, I think that helps to reduce their anxiety. One of the things that we really try to help students develop is their fact fluency. And so those are things that you can do even on a car ride, is just for fun. You can even play a game out of fact fluency, what's 2 times 4, and just see, do they know it? They can even ask you some. In fact, this year when I was on the 6th grade overnight trip, we were doing a hike and I had a student asking me all sorts of fact fluencies questions, which I loved. And we went back and forth together and it was kind of a game and it was fun to do. And that just helps them build their confidence around math. And the more that they are fluent with their facts, the more that they can then focus on what the question is really asking them. And so it helps, again, build their confidence around fluency in math. Reading, and we always encourage reading to your child every night, or having them read to you or you read to them, and asking questions beforehand, and also even asking questions, during and after, to check for understanding and what did they hear, and tell me about what do you think was the moral of the story, and just questions like that to kind of gauge what they understand as they're reading. A lot of the homework that gets sent home is going to be direct prep for some of these tests. And so just being engaged and looking at what's coming home and being able to engage with your child and ask them questions on what they're learning and what is their understanding of that. So on test day, one of the big things is just making sure that your child is getting enough rest beforehand, that they're getting plenty of sleep that night, that they're eating a healthy breakfast in the morning with some protein, because it is a longer morning in the classroom, and they don't have access to snacks because of testing regulations. And so it's really important that they come to school with their bellies full, and they're ready to focus in on that test and not on, oh, I'm hungry, I wish I had a snack. We also provide many things on test day to help support students, and we will have some snacks here in the morning to make sure that students have eaten, but you as a parent can also make sure that they eat a healthy breakfast that day. We do only want your child to come to school if they're feeling well. I know it's tempting, and even times students just want to get the test done. But if they're sick, they're really not going to perform at their best. So it is really important that they come to school feeling healthy. We have days built into our schedule to make up tests for students that are sick. So that is one thing. If you feel like your child is not well, it is okay. We will make up that test. We would rather them take it when they're feeling healthy. And then just providing kind of a calm morning, making sure that they know that you believe in them and they're going to do great, sticking with the routine, just engaging with them and providing encouragement as they come into school that morning. And then as you get the scores after the test, you can of course check in with your child and see how they felt about it. But one of the big things that we want students to remember and parents to remember is that it is important information, but it is not a full predictor of a student's success. This is one assessment. It's one assessment that determines, or we can look at to see, how much what was the content they know. But again, this is one assessment. It doesn't mean that this is the end all be all. There's always room for growth. And so we also want to encourage students and make them, aware and understand that this is one test it's one way that they can show what they've learned, but there's several other ways that they also can show what they've learned. So those are just ways that as a parent, you can kind of help support your child before, during, and after the test.
Now let's talk a little bit about what happens after the test and families get those scores that the students have been waiting on. So we call these ISRs, and that just stands for individual student reports. And the students get these for the math, the science, and the reading EOG. And if we'll look on the next slide, I will let you see what that looks like. So this is a sample ISR for a 5th grade math EOG. The reading of the science EOG is set up in a very similar way. I do want to just kind of focus your attention on that phrase that's there below that first box. It says that this report provides information on how your student performed on the EOG. Your student score is only one way of knowing how your student is progressing in school. Parents, students, and school staff should consider all available information when making decisions about student success. And that's a phrase that's coming not just from us at Brevard Academy, but that's straight from the North Carolina Department of Instruction. Just really emphasizing that this is an important data point, but it's only one data point in determining what kind of success that the student has made to help us determine those next steps for the student in the next instructional year. If you look at that dial, you'll see a not proficient, a level 3, a level 4, and a level 5. Not proficient means that they are not proficient in those grade level skills, and that could be any range of a grade level below to 2 grade levels below of where they would need to score. The level 3, that is a proficiency score. So they scored proficient in grade 5 math if they scored a level 3, but that means that they're probably still going to need some extra support moving into that 6th grade year. A level 4 and a level 5, those are nice and steady, well within range of where they needed to score as far as their skills go. This student would have scored a level 5 according to this scale, and that would mean that heading into 6th grade, the student would need some opportunities for some extension activities because they are scoring above grade level where they might have some places where they would need to be challenged some more heading into the next grade level. You'll see there's a box that says end of grade mathematics next to the dial, And this just shows you the actual scores that you would need to achieve. And it gives you a comparison of the student compared to the school average, the district average, and the state average. The school average and the district average would be the same average for Brevard Academy, since we are a charter school. So those numbers would turn out the same. And then the state average, you can see that would be all of the students in the state of North Carolina that took this 5th grade math test. Down at the bottom, you can see just a larger explanation of what the achievement level means. So if your student scored a 3, that would give an explanation of what a level 3 achievement level means, and so forth. And then you have the percentile rank. This is a number that you're going to see a lot in these standardized tests. You'll also see this show up in your iReady benchmark testing as well. So this student scored an 89 percentile, which means that their score is higher than 89% of the North Carolina grade 5 students who took this test in the normed year. So the last time they normed these tests, that's the day that they are placing for these comparisons. So you're not necessarily looking at the data from the current year when we're looking at that percentile rate. And then the quantile, that is very similar to the percentile. It's just a range, almost like a Lexile score. If you think of a Lexile score for reading, this would be similar for math. You can do a really quick Google search and find all of the ranges for those by grade level. So this student, it tracks that if they had a 910Q, that means that they are in the upper end of that quantile, which places them in that 89 percentile. So once again, I just want to end by reading this from the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction website, because I think that this is so important, that the scores on these assessments are only one of many indicators of how students are progressing. Test scores should always be considered along with all other available information provided by the teacher about the student. And I am very confident. I know that our staff and our teachers at Brevard Academy use various amounts of data point. They're collecting data every single day, even as they are teaching, to make sure that they're making the best decisions about each individual student.
Thank you, Ms. Monk. Thank you, Ms. Seefeld. Thank you, Ms. Wolf. And that's just an overview of the EOGs and what they are like at Brevard Academy. Please continue to keep up with our webpage, with Class Dojo, to find out when students will be taking each one of those assessments. You can also find more information about the end of grade tests on ncdpi.org and go to that end of grade test tab there. And at this point, I am going to go ahead and stop the recording.